Hello, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Molly Silberberg, and I run BAM's Humanities Programming. For the past 7.5 years, we've been collaborating with Greenlight Bookstore on a series called Unbound, where we bring artists, authors, and public figures to BAM to celebrate their newest work. While we weren't able to gather earlier this month to celebrate David Lan's truly captivating memoir, As If by Chance, I'm grateful to be able to do so virtually. As If by Chance, published by Faber Faber, is described by Lan as a work of memory. It weaves together his childhood in South Africa, his tenure as artistic director of the Young Vic from 2000 to 2018, during which he transformed it into a world-class theater, and his collaborations with artists from around the world. Some of his New York productions include A View from the Bridge, A Man of Good Hope, Yerma, The Jungle, The Inheritance, and Medea, which was just on earlier this year at BAM, where he also serves as theater associate. He'll be joined in conversation with director and producer Stephen Daldry. I'll be asking just a few questions to get us started. David, would you read a short passage for us? For those of you watching, this is from a section entitled Intuition, about halfway through the book.
Artistic director Stephen Daldry asks me to join his team at the Royal Court as writer in residence, which makes some sense as I have a great idea for a play, but I can't write every moment God sends, can anyone? I attend the court's famously febrile script meetings. Each week, the group's opinions on 8 or 10 new plays are solicited and meticulously marked up on the multiple columns of a complex grid. It's quickly obvious that agree or disagree, grid or no grid, the only accurate indicator of future seasons at the theatre is which plays Stephen pops into his cycling bag and takes home with him. The job description Stephen gave me, never written down, was do what you like until you meet resistance. So if I liked the sound, the aura, the style, the director, the feel of a new show that the theatre was producing, I'd attach myself, read drafts, suggest revisions, sometimes sit in on auditions, watch many rehearsals and all the previews. Some shows I only dipped in and out of because more wasn't welcome, or I had no special feeling for the subject or the artists. One show I feared would crash, weak play, wrong director, I rewrote from start to finish over a weekend, my version going inevitably correctly into the bin on Monday morning. No deal was ever made. As soon as writer or director had had enough of me, I'd be out of there, back to my own play. But why should any director put up with this? I guess because one never said or implied or even thought, if I were writing or directing, here's how I do it. What one did was intuit, if one could, what the writer or director was working to create and have ideas on how they might better achieve what they'd imagined. Together, Stephen and I watched every preview.
Thank you, David. What do you think allowed you to play that role for writers or directors, to hone that sense of intuition without imposing your own viewpoint or perspective? And for both of you, I'm wondering if you remember, what would you talk about after you watched each of those previews together?
I guess the thing about doing that particular job was that I was really in love with theatre. I was really in love with the possibilities of making shows. And I guess in some way or other, people felt that I wasn't in it for me, I was in it for the show. And I guess if one was able to go on saying things which were valuable, interesting, provocative, whether they agreed with what I was suggesting or not suggesting, one treated it like a bunch of friends that you hoped would do as well as they possibly could. I mean, the only engagement was with the success of the production, the success of the director and the actors and everybody else at making the best job of the play.
The Royal Court has always been a theatre that's defended the right to fail. What that really means is that most of the productions we do are failures. I think most of the conversation David and I had at the end of the shows was, what on earth were we thinking putting this on in the first place? So a lot of it is the struggle to try to maintain as much dignity as one can by getting through the production in front of an audience with some possibility that it is an evening worthwhile going to. And sometimes we did that. And also, I have to say, sometimes, one got lucky and the production soared. But most of the time, we would look at each other and go, what the hell, what were we thinking?
What were we thinking, and what can we do
to save this obvious disaster?
Yeah, there was quite a lot of that. But I think occasionally we came up with an idea. I think occasionally we did.
You came up with loads of ideas. I think I can honestly say, and I'm sure we'll go on to talk about this, but there was a number of plays and productions you actually literally made happen and for want of a better way of describing it, saved.
I'm just wondering where you begin with that impulse of trying to save a show, since it's pretty far down the line.
Well, saving a show when it's pretty far down the line is difficult, but and you never know whether your great idea for saving the show or even just improving the show is a good idea. You don't know that. You're guessing. You're always guessing, and But what I learned to do is make everybody my best friend. So the writer was my best friend, director was my best friend, designer was my best friend, everybody was my best friend. And I would hang around all the time. I was always there. I was really there a lot. I'd go to a lot of rehearsals, I'd hang out in the work. I mean, not sort of hanging out in the pub or something, but in the work, I'd be there. Because what I was looking for is the moment when I have to say the thing you have to say. And then you have to be everybody's friend, so they listen to you. Because if you're not there, and then you come in and you say the radical thing, you got the wrong actor, or the radical thing, the plays the wrong way around, this just doesn't work, the back wall is pink and it really should be yellow. What the radical thing that you got to say, you've got to find your moment to say it. So you sort of, it's a curious thing because you're part of the team, but nobody thinks you're part of the team. And also, if you're running the theater, they think you're the boss. That's the other thing. So if you're the boss and you walk into rehearsal, their rehearsal's immediately terrible. And they go, oh, it's such a pity you came today because yesterday was great, but today, I'm sorry, it's terrible. So and that always happens if you walk in on a show. So you've got to hang out so that they can work without thinking, the boss is about to fire them. Yeah, so it's being, it's integrating yourself as much as you can into the life of the making of the show.
A lot of producers work through the simple idea that they choose the project, gather a group of people, and then the rest of the producer's role is really to police them to make sure they don't spend so much money. Now, David, you didn't do that. You chose to be, and then you succeeded brilliantly as a creative producer. That's somebody who is there all the time, who actually is in direct conversation, who is part of the creative team, not part of the producing team. And that I never heard you, in the shows I did with you, I never heard you say, that's going to cost too much money. You never policed me, which is what people always perceive to be a producer, but you're always with me. And that felt like a real difference. So you always felt like a partner, not a producer.
Yeah, well, the job as I saw it was, I mean, if I was working with you, Stephen, on the couple of shows we did together, then my job was to enable you as best I could to make the show you wanted to make. And though sometimes you said quite scary things, like when we were doing The Inheritance, and at a certain point you went, I need 25 more people to come in, for 45 seconds at the end of part one, and you could go, no, are you mad? Are you crazy? We can't. But that's no fun. I mean, that's not enjoyable. What was enjoyable was to say, okay, so how are we going to do that crazy thing? I mean, which doesn't mean that I wanted to put theatre financially at risk. I mean, you had to balance the books. It had to work. But the job was that was my problem. Your problem was how to do the best production that you could do of the play. My problem was to make that possible.
It always felt like it was the function of the exercise was to release whatever creative energy, not just from me, but from the actors and the designers, as you possibly could, which is why it always felt the best theatre you could possibly work in.
Yeah, I mean, I learned how to choose the people I wanted to work with. if I didn't feel that I could have the kind of relationship I wanted to have with the director. I mean, principally the director, because most of my work was with directors, and also with designers, also with writers. But most of my way into a show, into making a show, was principally through the director. When it is a bunch of friends making a show, then it's great. You got a chance, and people are free to do, to say crazy things like, I want to bring on an extra 25 people or whatever it is. It actually worked the other way as well, because do you remember, Stephen, when we took the Jungle out of a very small studio theatre and put it in the main theatre?
I remember you did, David. I didn't.
No,
you moved it.
When I did that. No, I did that. But the point is, I could say to you, trust me, I know what I'm doing. I'd seen enough and I'd read enough of what was happening, and also the subject was the subject. You go, trust me, and I, you didn't immediately trust me, but we got you around to that.
Yeah, but the decision you made, of course, was crucial and was correct. At that point, though, I think we only had about 20 minutes material, and I was assuming it was going to be 4 nights in a little studio, and good luck to us. And it was only because of your persistence and tenacity, and indeed faith in it, that actually it moved. And then when Young Vic played in the West End and went to the United States, without that belief and faith that you had, we still have played 5 nights in a little studio theatre. David, your book is it's such an unusual memoir, if it is a memoir at all. But you very movingly and very unusually, you talk about this extraordinary childhood you had in South Africa, being a young man growing up in South Africa, and you weave that into the narrative of running a theatre in London. And that weaving of those two narratives is so surprising and so unusual. But there was one thing that really struck me when you're talking about your childhood, because as a young man, you printed out little cards saying magic about what you did, which was magic and puppets, children parties, a speciality. And I just wondered, with magic and puppets and children's parties a speciality, did anything ever change when you ran the Young Vic, or is it still magic, puppets and children's parties?
It's magic, puppets and children's parties. Magic, puppets and older people's parties too. Yeah. I think I've answered that question now. Yeah.
When I talk about children's parties, what I really am fishing for is, so you're talking about, it's about access, really. Is that you had a theatre that that was one of the most unusual theatres in the UK, because you had this extraordinary attitude towards bringing in young people, and you gave away a lot of free tickets. What is the theatre? I mean, which challenges, certainly even when you're performing, there are challenges about not just who the audience is, but who it's for. Who was the Young Vic for? Who were you doing it for yourself? Were you doing it for the audience? Who was it for?
I'll tell you what I used to say about that. What I used to say about that is, I wanted the people who walked past the theatre to be the same people who walked into the theatre. I mean, one of the advantages I had in running a theatre, I'd never run a theatre, but I had written a lot of plays, and I had worked on a lot of shows, which I had written with a lot of different directors. And I guess the thing I knew was that when a playwright writes a play, they write it for everybody. I mean, the fantasy is always there that this is the play. The play I am writing is going to be the play which everybody sees. I'm writing for everybody. I'm writing for the world. And it's going to be in a little theatre, and then it's going to be in a big theatre, and then it's going to be West End, and then it's going to be a Netflix series, right? Everybody thinks that when you're writing your little play, right? And I like that. And I've been through that. So you went, okay, so if we're doing a show, whatever the show is, it's a new play, or it's a play by Bertolt Brecht, or it's a play by whoever the play's by, I want to produce it in a way that anybody could have a good time, could have a direct connection to the play, which means a direct connection to the writer in that writer's time. That's what interested me. So I wanted the shows, whoever they were written by or produced by, directed by, sometimes we worked with people who worked in Europe and worked in big theaters and didn't think this way at all, and thought what I was saying to them was pretty weird, actually. But I would say, yeah, we are doing this wacko play by Jon Fosse with 2 characters, and it's the most depressing thing anybody's ever seen. But it was directed by a great genius director. It was fantastic production. But I want the young people from the estate across, the working class kids from the estate across the road. I want them in the theater, as well as the people who are going to fly in from Vienna and from St. Petersburg to see the show. I want everybody together. So, and I guess that's a party, isn't it? That's a kind of a party, isn't it?
David, I'm going to steal one of your questions or sets of questions from the book, because in the later part of the book, you document a conversation that you and Stephen had about directing. And you ask him, what are you looking at? What are you listening to? And what are you doing? And in so many ways, the entire book is a meditation on those questions. So anyone tuning in should really read the whole thing in order to glean your answers to those questions. But I'm wondering how, in your role as a producer, you might directly answer your own questions that you posed.
Yeah, I mean, what are you doing to an artist is a good question. I mean, partly because a lot of people say, I can't do it. I can't do it. You go, no, can I? I mean, no. I mean, what are you actually doing? And Stephen gave a very interesting question. I remember him saying, and I think this is in the book. He's saying, do you mean what am I listening to, or what am I looking at? You're like, yeah, let's do that. What are you listening to? What are you looking at? But what are you doing? What are you actually doing in the room? And another director who I work with very often, Richard Jones, who I've written about a few times in the book. And Richard, works all over the place, works all over Europe, has worked a lot in the States, in New York, all over the place. And I remember Richard once saying to me that for him, and Richard does big, noisy shows, big, complicated, noisy shows, sometimes on the biggest stages, Broadway stages, big opera houses. And Richard said to me that directing is a meditation. Directing is a meditation. I really like that. I think that's really good, because what you're doing is trying to use everything you've got, is trying to find the way of getting access to everything you got, every memory, every muscular memory, every emotional memory. What happened to me when I was 5 years old? What happened to me last week? You reach into all of that. When Stephen and I were working together, in a break, you take 20 minutes off, I'd go, oh, where's he gone? I've got to ask him something really important, like, we can't find exactly the shade of green socks. Do you mind if they're blue socks? So something really important like that. And I go, where is he? Oh, he's out in the courtyard. And I go, and he'd be doing something, and I'd stand there going, oh, can I interrupt this? Or what's going on? And they go, what are you doing? And he'd go, no, I'm trying to come up with an idea. I'm working. I'm trying to find the idea. And you go, well, what does that mean to be actually looking for an idea? It's a kind of process of putting the dipstick in to your nervous system and going, have I got anything? Have I got anything there? Yeah, I know. Why don't they all do it back to front? Or, hey, what if actually they're not brother and sister, whatever, coming up with the idea that animates it. And that process of really looking inside yourself for what you need, that's close. I'm not saying that's what it is, but I think that's close to what people do.
When I was a young director, I was told by quite a famous older director about how to direct. And he said, the most important thing is just, you got to remember, it's not therapy. Okay, no one's interested in your therapy. No one's interested in your psychosis. No one's interested in your psychoanalysis. It's just do the fucking play. Don't don't make it your therapy. And I took this on board. I went, okay, well, that sounds really smart. This guy was really smart, really famous. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll do that. It took me years to realize he was entirely wrong. I'm only interested in my therapy. That's all I'm interested in. I'm only interested in how it fucks with my psychosis or how it messes with my head or my imagination. It is only about my personal relationship with the work. That's the only thing that I find interesting.
And when I was looking for directors to work with, it was my guess about whether the director understood not that they are more important than the play. They're not more important than the play. And do you want to see the play? Yes, I want to see the play. We're doing Galileo by Bertolt Brecht. I want to see Galileo by Bertolt Brecht. But the fact is, the only Galileo that you can see is the one that we're making now. And it's only going to have life if the director and the actors and the designers and everyone else use everything they've got in order to make Galileo by Bertolt Brecht alive now. It's the energy that comes from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 artists together doing something. The idea of actually an old Royal Court thing, which I always hated, was we are here to serve the play. We're here to serve the play. I mean, no, you're not here. It's the wrong verb. Nobody's serving anybody. It's sort of terrible old rubbish that the Royal Court handed on generation to generation. True? Yeah, is it rubbish?
I
always hated that. I hated all that. You're not there to serve the play. You're there to love the play. You're there to love the play. If you don't love it, don't do it.
The one question that you always seem to ask, or always felt like it was answered in any production you went to see, was the simple question, why now? In other words, why are we watching this play now? I mean, you can go and see all sorts of plays at the National, all sorts of plays around the world, and you can watch it, you can enjoy it, but it doesn't answer the question, why am I watching it now? You always seem to answer the question, why now? Which is what it made it alive.
Is there something that draws you to a particular work, or is it just what feels right in a moment? And for the collaborations that you two have done together, I'm thinking about the recent works you've done between The Jungle and The Inheritance. Is there any sort of common thread between the productions you've worked on, or is each one just unique in and of itself?
No,
or what brings you to it unique?
It's difficult to answer that. I mean, the work that Stephen and I have done together, though the shows themselves are very different. The Inheritance by Matthew Lopez and The Jungle by Joe Robertson, Joe Murphy. Very, very different shows, very different sorts of experience. But they're both absolutely of the moment. I mean, I put it another way. Another way I used to think about this is I want the theatre that I produce to be continuous with people's lives. It must be part of a continuum of people's lives, not separate from their lives. It must be part of their lives. And both those shows are part of people's lives. They may not know how close they are to the refugees from Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, currently in Calais, as they were when we did the shows. They still are, actually, but as they were when we did the play. But I know they are. I believe they are. I believe this is part of your life. And The Inheritance, I mean, not everybody is a 24-year-old gay young man living in New York. But the play will show you that that they are part of your lives.
The Young Vic, in your tenure, became possibly one of the most famous theatres in Europe, which is quite an achievement given the fact that British theatre is not interested in Europe and Europe is not particularly interested in British theatre. But the Young Vic became a European theatre. It wasn't. It was also a local theatre. And as you said, it was just about people coming off the street living in Southwark. But it was a theatre that resonated throughout Europe. And you got some of the greatest names in Europe to come and work there and introduce them into a context, a working context within the English language, which was incredibly new to all of us. Are you imagining continuing those relationships with those European artists that you started? Is one question. But I just wanted you to talk a little. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about your very personal relationship with someone like, well, some of the great European directors you worked with, like Scherer.
The thing I used to do is once I'd fixed on somebody, I want to work with Scherer, I want to work with whoever, I'd go and see everything that they did.
Yeah.
Wherever we were, I just go and see everything, so that I had a kind of language with them. I knew and I'd talk to people who work with them. I'd sort of try and understand who they were and how to try and make it good.
But talking about walking with giants, you also made the Young Vic the home to Peter Brook. Peter Brook, the Young Vic became his automatic London home. But your relationship with Peter Brook didn't start at the Young Vic. That had started before, yeah?
Yeah, I'd started working with Peter maybe 15 years before I started running the Young Vic. I'd worked with him actually on a film that, like most films, didn't happen. He had an idea for a film, and he asked me to work with him on writing a screenplay. I write about that in the book, and my title, inability to produce anything of any value in the making of the film. It was a very, very difficult subject, I have to say. Maybe an impossible one. As a movie, Peter subsequently, 25 years later, did it as a play. But I got to know him, and again, I spent a lot of time together. I followed him around. I mean, in the days when I was working with him, he was directing all over the place in Europe and in America, and wherever there was anything that he'd done, a new production or a touring show, I would go and I would hang out and try and sort of understand how this worked, how that relationship could work. And then pretty soon after he opened a show in his theater in Paris at the Bookstore, and I went to see it, and I loved it. It was one of the best things he ever did, I think. Very beautiful. Initially in French, Le Costume, later done in English as the suit. It was a fabulous show. And then you go, oh God, I've got to bring this. You got to bring this. And a very expensive company. They still are, actually. Peter, of course, is still around, still directing, still touring. But we managed to find a way to do that. And then we brought it back, and then we did it in English, and then we did another show. And then I started co-producing with him, which really just means, working with Peter, that really just means putting the money up, by handing some money. But I'd go watch rehearsals, I'd hang out. And he's very easy. Once you get over the difficulty of talking to the person who everybody says is the greatest director in the world, you get past that. And mostly, the difficulty is you just think everything you're going to say is completely stupid. Peter, Peter, that tablecloth. I don't think it should be a white tablecloth. I think you go, oh, just shut up. And he goes, oh no, that's a good. Oh yeah, okay. What do you call it? I think it should be green. Well, of course, it never goes green, and it stays white. But nonetheless, you find your way. You can find your way in.
David, you talk about when you want to work with a director, you follow their entire career or everything. You see everything that they've done that you possibly can to have that language. You invest so much in these relationships. I'm wondering how that all relates to the title of the book, As If by Chance. How did you settle on that title? How did that refrain keep coming back? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, the title just arrived at a certain point, and then I started to write to that title. I found myself finding ways in which that idea had meaning in different circumstances, and I told myself that the reason it's there is because, and I didn't. Sometimes I thought I should write this into the book, and I never did that. Good or bad, I don't know. But theatre is as if, what happens on a stage is one person walks on and says, oh, hello, I didn't know you were going to be here. We're sort of meeting. It's as if by chance. It's not really by chance. You discover in the course of the story that it's not by chance at all. But that's the premise of so much storytelling, is people think, oh, that's interesting. What are you doing here? You go, no, actually. And so on. So theatre, it's probably resonant of theatre, of the storytelling we do in theatre, because you can't do backstory, you can't sort of explain in it. It just happens. Oh, what are we doing here? And I said, oh, like that. I like that as an idea. Quite late on, a couple of weeks before we had to lock down the book, I had a panic about the title. Friends of mine, I gave the book to a few people to read, and suddenly again, we don't get the title, don't get the title. And they go, oh, the title doesn't work. And I came up with another couple of titles, and I tried to go, no, forget it. It's the name of the book. It's the name of the book. It's just what it's called. Maybe it's a terrible title, I don't know, but it's what the book is called. But there's quite a lot in the good. But there's quite a lot in the book, which is occasionally something is not, and I know it's not a chance. But some things are chance. I mean, the fact that, okay, I'll tell you, I mean, and this resonates with our conversation. In my last year, Stephen directed 2 shows for me. And I've known Stephen for, half my life, actually, probably. But only in the very last year, the last minute, we did two shows together. And we kind of went, oh, it's a bit weird. Is this all right? And you go, yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's what's happening. We're doing it. By chance. Oh, it's just chance. It's just chance it's happened. But it wasn't really. It wasn't really. I thought it was a good example of it, because it was I mean, I hope we'll do many more things together. But we had been talking about theatre for a very long time. And Stephen, I remember, I mean, a funny thing about that is Stephen gave me a copy of The Inheritance by Matthew Lopez. And I remember, like 5 pages in, going, yes, we'll do this. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. We'll do it. And the odd thing is, those 5 pages didn't stay in the play, did they? By the time we got to do the play, there was a completely different first 5 pages. Because do you remember when the place, when we read the play, it was a bunch of boys reading. And they were just reading, and then it became, no, they're writing, and that changed the whole play. But it's sort of like, and the thing with The Jungle was the idea of doing. I mean, there was a play that the 2 writers had written, which we knew, like many first plays by young writers, is going to go on a bit of a journey, and we're all collectively going to take this play on a bit of a journey, and that it will be the play by those 2 writers, and it will be entirely theirs. And that's what you do. But having that play, that subject, like the most important subject, how do we deal with the realities of the political situation that we have all collectively created, which causes this amount of suffering to people? That subject about refugees just down the road, an hour away on the train, plus Stephen as director, you just go, yes, we'll do that. Yeah, good, we'll do that. We'll do that. But also to be, I mean, I'm talking about my book. Also, I thought I know how to do, I know how to do this. I know how to do this.
I didn't. You did. I had no idea.
No, I know how to do this. I know how to get behind this. I'm not saying I know how to solve every problem, because of course I didn't, but I know how to create the energy and the commitment that this show will need from everybody. And it was kind of that, going back to the question Stephen asked me before, why did I stop? Is I thought I can't do that anymore. I want to do something different. I can't do that anymore.
I want to invite everyone watching to go to Greenlight Bookstore and order yourself a copy of As If by Chance. It is some perfect reading for these moments where we are finding ourselves more inside. But yes, do go to Greenlight's website, purchase a copy. And David and Stephen, thank you both so much. It has truly been a pleasure to talk with you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks for having us.